I almost came to shul this morning in a full Santa outfit. And I was wondering what that effect might have been if I had done that. I actually have a full Santa outfit. Who doesn't? Does anyone else have a full Santa outfit? I have a Santa outfit because I was Santa one Purim, actually, is the reason I have a Santa outfit. But I've also played Santa in other contexts growing up. And I say that to be a little bit provocative, a little bit funny, but really if I'd come in wearing that red hat, I think some people would have been what is the rabbi doing? It's Shabbat, But I say that because I actually have, and I believe, I don't know if it was last year or a couple of years ago, Jason Blau gave a sermon like that. I wasn't here, so I don't know exactly what he said, but there's a lot about Christmas that I actually really appreciate. And I have, it may surprise some of you, my own kind of background, my past relationship to Christmas and the different ways in which I actually celebrated Christmas. And I'm going to just share some memories with you. The other day, I found myself texting my friend Sarah Bracha, Rabbi Sarah Bracha Geshuni, who most of you know. And we, of course, grew up with some of the same cultural frameworks. She grew up in an Orthodox community, but even in the Orthodox community in England, there's a sort of love and appreciation for certain Christmas traditions. And I texted her and said, I'm craving mince pies. And some of you probably don't even know what a mince pie is, but mince pies are this ubiquitous Christmas treat in England. They're like these sweet pastries stuffed with what's known as mincemeat, although it's not meat at all. It's got raisins and currants and other kinds of spiced fruit in it. And they're delicious, and I missed them. And then I started thinking about all of the ways in which Christmas traditions kind of seeped into our own family life. My theory, and some of you have heard me say this before, as to why Jews in England are more prone to celebrate Christmas than they are in America, is because we don't have Thanksgiving. And Christmas is actually predominantly a very, very secular holiday and a celebration. So there are a lot of Jewish families, even very observant Jewish families, who sort of honor some of the Christmas traditions because it's part of a cultural framework in which we were brought up. You get together, you have a big lunch, you get so full and sleepy from the turkey, just like on Thanksgiving, and you fall asleep on the couch, and then you wake up to watch the Queen's speech. The Queen always gives a speech on Christmas Day in the afternoon. You eat the mince pies and the Christmas pudding. You even have the little Christmas crackers, and all of these things were sort of part of my childhood. And I've got many memories. We didn't actually celebrate, we didn't have a Christmas tree or anything like that, but I do. Many times it was our annual ski vacation. We'd be in Switzerland and Austria, which is magical over Christmas too, being in these European ski resorts and celebrating Christmas in that way. And I know for many people, Christmas is a time of fear, of resentment, of the sort of dominant Christian culture. But I never really had that experience. And then, I've got these amazing memories of spending several Christmas days with school friends of mine who weren't Jewish and just being part of their own family traditions. I even have got memories of being in a school, and I went to a very Christian school actually, but going on Christmas Eve to all of the pubs near our school and singing Christmas carols, raising money for Save the Children, and having a pint of beer in each of the pubs along the way. By the time we got to the last of the pubs, we'd be, oh, yeah. But these are lived memories that I have, and I feel like it's important that I can be honest about them and not have people be shocked like the rabbi celebrates Christmas. I don't actually celebrate Christmas, but there's some of the music I absolutely love. I don't like the cheesy Christmas music that you hear in Target or Starbucks at this time of year and it's just playing on a loop. I don't appreciate that, but there is some of the Christmas music, and of course the best Christmas music is all written by Jews anyway, but some of the Christmas music is really nostalgic for me, And like if even in a modern Orthodox synagogue in London, I would not be at all surprised if whoever was leading the service would sneak in a few Christmas tunes into the Kedusha of the Amidah or into other parts of the service. And I was so close to doing it, and then I stopped myself. So if that comes in Musaf, don't be shocked or surprised or offended. Would you be? We'll see. I mean, it's an interesting discussion because I know that some of you probably have a very different relationship with Christmas, and I do understand that the American Jewish experience is a bit different. And the whole happy holidays thing there was no happy holidays. It was Hanukkah, it was happy Hanukkah, it was Christmas, it was Merry Christmas, that was how it was. So I then have a series of memories, which I'm going to link a little bit to the Parsha in a moment, of then just feeling like, well, actually I don't celebrate Christmas, and therefore, as a Jew, maybe it's an opportunity to help out the people who are celebrating Christmas. So for many years I volunteered in different places on Christmas days, as I know many of you do, and I'm sure some of our members are down at the band shell today. There's a big serving of a Christmas meal today that Bridge House is organising down by the band shell. And people in the past here, I mean it's Shabbat, so it's a bit more difficult, but I've helped serve the Christmas meal before and things like that. But I worked in hospitals, volunteering in hospitals and taking like Christmas gifts to the nurses and the doctors and going around giving Christmas cheer to the patients. And yes, even dressed as Santa a couple of times to do that. Ho, ho, ho! It's a great role, by the way, playing Santa. And then there was a period of my life where I was working as an actor, and I was spending a lot of time up in the West End of London, and I became very aware of my own nervousness, discomfort, not knowing what to do around the homeless community. And I noticed myself one day just sort of crossing the street to avoid having a human contact with a homeless person. And something shifted inside me, and I thought I have to actually confront this reality. And so it was that year that I discovered an organisation called Crisis at Christmas, which was a massive organisation in London that was, back then, I mean, I think it's changed now, but none of the traditional places where homeless people would go for shelter and warmth, in a very cold winter, were open on Christmas Day. So Crisis at Christmas was this massive organisation where they would, every year, some gigantic warehouse would donate its facility, and it would be set up for, the years that I was there were about 3,000 people sleeping every night on mattresses on the floor of these warehouses and getting 3 meals a day. And then there were people providing services. There were podiatrists and doctors and dentists and hairdressers who were all just sort of there to offer their services free to the homeless community. And then there were people who would donate it. There was a clothing store, and people could go and get new clothes. They could get a shave and a haircut and get their teeth and their feet seen to and their eyes seen to. There were opticians there too. And it was like an amazing operation on a massive scale. And it actually was, I think, for the whole week of Christmas, it would be running in that way. And so I kind of started volunteering there. And then there are hundreds of volunteers, and there's a volunteer room. And one of the things that the volunteers would do, there were so many different things that the volunteers would be doing if you were on a break. And there's sort of not judgment about working. Some of you who work with the homeless community know it's not about us sort of judging what their lifestyle choices, but just about being present with them. And there would be people who would donate pounds and pounds of hand-rolling tobacco and papers, because a lot of people in the homeless community in England anyway roll their own cigarettes, right? And so one of the volunteer roles was to roll cigarettes. And then in the morning, as people are waking up, we'd sort of hand out these cigarettes. And one of my personal favourite memories was me, and don't ask how I knew how to roll cigarettes, that's a whole other story, but I did. And so this memory of me teaching 3 Irish nuns how to roll cigarettes on Christmas Day in the volunteer room, where down below us there were 3,000 homeless people. And this nun going, "So when do you lick the paper?" Like that. So that was one memory. But what I want to talk about, so it was Christmas Day, and I'll be very honest with you and say that I had a little bit of a hangover. And it was very, very early in Christmas morning, and I was on a volunteer shift. And the first thing I was put to work doing was picking up all of the mattresses after people had woken up. And the first mattress I put my hands on was covered in human waste. And at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning with a hangover, that's not a nice way to start the day particularly, but dealt with it. There was a place where all the soiled mattresses would go, put the soiled mattresses down. And then the next, I was like, oh, okay, next. And then I was put to work in the kitchen to help serve breakfast. And there was this gigantic pot full of hot baked beans. English people like to have baked beans for breakfast, you may know that. And so I picked up this gigantic thing. I mean, it was like my size of baked beans. And as I picked it up in the wrong way and it fell. And there was like an ocean of baked beans on the floor of the serving area. And I was like, this isn't working. So I went back to the volunteer room, took some time out. And then I just went down and I watched what was going on. And I started being fascinated by the podiatrists. In England, we actually call them chiropodists, who were like working on people's feet. And you imagine like many of the people who live on the streets are walking a lot, and so their feet are not in great shape. And I was watching all of the other services, and I had just that year, this was in the early 1990s, I had just that year qualified as a holistic massage therapist. And I just thought, wow, it would be really great to just give some of these people, like after they've seen the podiatrist and had their feet patched up, to give them a little foot massage. So I went and sought out one of the organizers and asked if that would be okay, and she said, yeah, sure, set up. So I set up, and then, within an hour I had like a massive line of people, and then the next day I actually brought in a massage table and a massage chair, and I was sort of working on people's necks and shoulders, and then it became a whole thing. And then by the following year we had a whole team of people doing it, and it was just this very, very powerful, transformative experience actually. And why am I telling this story? Because what I realized in that moment, more than anything else I was doing, picking up soiled mattresses and spilling baked beans all over the floor, I realized more than anything else how every single one of the people in that community has their own story, and their own stories are unique and different, and they have their own names, right? And so there is something about working on someone in that way. And as I was like holding their feet, and these are people who for whom physical touch either doesn't happen at all or it happens in a violent way, if you think about some of the people on the streets, and just watching some of these people, as just giving them a gentle foot massage, just watching them uncurl, and then as they were uncurl, it would like their hearts would open and they would share their story with me, and I heard the most incredible stories, and it was such a gift and a privilege to hear these stories. I actually wrote this article. I was asked to write this article up, and I just refound this. This was the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine from April 1992. And the cover story was, there's a picture of a homeless woman there, and the cover story was offering massage to the homeless, which was a story that I wrote about that experience that was published in this journal. But I'm sharing this not to sort of, say like, this is a Christmas story for me. This was Christmas Day in probably 1991, I guess, because that was written the following April. But fast forward to 2021. Last Tuesday, I was asked to participate in the memorial service for the members of the homeless community who've died in this last year here in Boulder, down at the band show. And it was so incredibly moving. 30 people, including a mother and her baby, died in Boulder, either directly because of being out on the streets, or as they were recently housed, and just as the impact that homelessness had on their bodies. 30 people died. And as I'm sitting participating and reading a little bit at this event, and just hearing the stories, and as the names are read, and as you realize that these are not just 30 of the homeless, these are 30 people who have a name, 30 people who have a story, 30 people who have been part of a community, and however much we may feel like our decisions and our life choices have been different to their own. These are human beings with dignity, many of whom whose lives have, fallen on terrible times through poverty or mental illness or addiction or all of the other ways in which people have their stories. And I wish I'd kept the list with the names on it so that I could read those names, because just hearing those names and then hearing other people from the homeless community come up and actually tell the stories of some of the people who were part of this community, and this amazing woman called Jennifer, who started an organization called Feet Forward, which is the organization that Karen Robinson and others from our community go every single Tuesday at 2:30. They make a meal for that community down by the band show and give out socks and toiletries and other things. And we, of course, as a community, collected many pairs of socks that were given out this last Tuesday. But Jennifer herself was homeless for many years, and she's now housed, and she has given her life to starting this non-profit organization, along with 3 other people who are also previously homeless people who are now housed, and they have started this organization, which is just extraordinary and powerful, the service that they are providing every Tuesday. But Jennifer she spoke about the people that she knew in that community, and she said it's so easy to dismiss the homeless community of Boulder as the least of humanity, but I know them to be the best of humanity, she said, because I knew who they were as individuals, and they would do anything for anybody, and there was a tight community on the streets. And yes, some of us, including me, I'm sure have had negative experiences with some people in the homeless community. We've had stuff stolen by people who are stealing things to pay for their drug habits, but that we can't let those experiences kind of diminish the humanity of this whole community. They each have a name. So we start the second book of the Torah, and even though in English the name of the book of the Torah is Exodus, in Hebrew it's Shemot, which means names. It means names, and it's probably called Shemot because it starts with a list of names of the Israelites who were the descendants of Jacob, right? And the people who were growing in prosperity. But the significance of names runs throughout the Parsha and really throughout the whole Torah. The fact that Pharaoh is just described as Melech Hadash, as a new king who didn't know Joseph. But then immediately we meet these 2 amazingly courageous midwives who are given names, Shifra and Puah. They are given names. They have the dignity of a name. When Moshe is given his name, he's given his name, and as Mori Yehudis, some of you may have read Mori Yehudis' article that came out this week, that's based on the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And she talks about Moshe's name doesn't only mean drawn from the water, but it could also mean draws other people out of the water, because Moshe's name describes who he was as the hero of the story and the hero of the book of Exodus. And then there are other names. We have other names. We have Moshe's son, Moshe's wife, Moshe's father-in-law. All have names because of the role that they play in the story. And everybody with a name has a sense of dignity and a sense of purpose. And the names are significant. When Moshe is at the burning bush, he hears his name called just as Abraham did. Moshe, Moshe. And it's that call by name, by the name Moshe, that calls him to wake up to his true self. I can't help thinking about some of the stories in the Torah in relationship to 2 movies that I've seen this week, which I've already alluded to. The first one, The Matrix, this whole idea what is our real life? There's the life that we live, and there's the life that we know to be a truer version of ourselves. And sometimes you see these names get changed, like Yaakov. Jacob becomes Yisrael. Is that when he leaves the Matrix? And then the other film I saw was Superman Meta-Universe, which, if anyone's seen it, I don't want to give too much spoiler alerts because it really is, I think, a wonderful film. It's really worth seeing. But really, if you think about it, all the superheroes and the villains all have names. And they have the names that they become, especially the villains that come in through the Meta-Universe. they're like these awful characters who mean harm, but they're all, if you look at the stories of them, they're all people who have mostly been scientists and doctors, but not always, have also been, electricians and people working in blue-collar jobs who, through a fate, through an accident, have somehow developed this superpower gone wrong, and they actually become destructive. And then they get on the Green Goblin and the other names that they take on in their evil forms. But part of this movie, again, I don't want to give spoiler alerts, but about is the healing of getting back to their actual true name, their true identity. And even with Spider-Man himself, of course, it's Peter Parker, right? But Peter Parker, the name Peter Parker in the movie becomes synonymous both with ultimate good and ultimate evil in the way it's presented through the media and through the fake news that comes out through the Daily Bugle. But enough, because I don't want to spoil it for you. But the point is that Spider-Man as an identity is someone who is like in the same way that Moshe is kind of a superhero. Peter Parker is a very sort of, in this movie, he's a high school kid, right? The previous Spider-Mans have not necessarily been high school, but he's a high school kid. And he's a high school kid with a great passion to save the world and to root out evil in the world, right? And in a sense, I think the makers of the movie were making that choice because it's a reminder of how the power and the passion of young people in this world, the young activists in this world who are making such a difference, right? And so there's all kinds of ways in which we all are superheroes, and we're superheroes sometimes when we hear our name being called. We can all be like a Moshe standing at the burning bush and hearing our name. What is it about Moshe that makes him stop? What is it about Moshe that gives him this combination of deep compassion and standing up against justice when he kills that Egyptian? That it's a shocking act, but it's an act that he cannot bear the injustice. On the one hand, he is deeply attuned to the suffering of his own people. On the other hand, he is appalled by the injustice, and the combination of the two make him the Moshe that he's able to be. But the point about Jewish tradition, and the point that Mori Yehudis makes in her article about It's a Wonderful Life, is that we're all Moshe, right? We're all George in a wonderful life. What Mori Yehudis says is the moment of sort of transition, really, in that movie, is when all of the people are calling out. She says in the movie, when George gets called by his names the most time is when people who he reached beyond himself to help come to express their gratitude by calling his name. George, George, George. They're calling his name, and then he's hearing in his being called by name, he's not hearing himself who is ready to take his own life. He's hearing himself who has been showing up time and time again to help other people, right? And so, we all have the capacity, our Jewish tradition tells us this, we all have the capacity to be evil and wretched and make bad choices. And we have the capacity to be like Moshe and to hear our name being called and to know that we can step out of the matrix and really fulfill a meaningful life with great purpose. And so, coming back to Christmas Day, I mean, Christmas in its essence, I mean, whatever fears some of us, especially people who've, whose ancestors have been survivors and people who've grown up in Europe, where clearly Christianity was a very dark force for the Jewish people. I don't want to erase that part of the history, but at its purest essence, Christmas is about treating each other kindly and with compassion and standing up against justice. And of course, we could look at the story of Moshe and we could look at the story of so many other spiritual heroes or superheroes, and you can see parallels in the story that the dominant culture of our country is celebrating today with the birth of Jesus, right? I mean, I think we would probably mostly all agree that some of what is done in that name is kind of unspeakably evil throughout history, and some of what has been done in the name of Christianity is just awful and unconscionable. And even to this day, some of us are very sensitized, I think, to some of what's coming out of the fundamentalist evangelical Christian world. But at its essence, the story and the birth of Jesus is not that different to the story and the birth of Moshe. The idea that there is a human being who has the capacity to help stand up against injustice, that there's a human being who is so overwhelmed by compassion, whether it's for people in the homeless community or for people within our own community. And there are so many opportunities to do mitzvot. Just within our own community, there are meal trains, there are visits, there are all kinds of things. There are opportunities to go and help with the homeless community. There are opportunities to show up. And sometimes just by hearing our name, being called out and showing up to do those things, it's like we are Moshe. We are Lahavdil, Jesus. And so I just offer that and return to the notion that everybody has a name. That's why I wanted to read that piece instead of the Haftorah today. Everybody has a name. We all have a name, and our names change. Some of us literally change our names. Some of us have a Marc name and a Mordechai Dov Ber name. You know, some of us have the same Hebrew name as English name, but most of us don't. And so, like, when we're called up to the Torah, Ya'amod, by our Hebrew name, are we being called up to a higher version of ourselves than when we're just like Marc hanging out? So I offer this, and I can't help myself, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say Merry Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, and we wish you a Merry Shabbat, we wish you a Merry Shabbat, we wish you a Merry Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. All right, Musaf. I will say, by the way, that it seems to me that unless Karen and or Paula are here, no one sets up anything for Kiddush right now. So I don't think there is any. If anyone is feeling moved to set up some cups for grape juice and a few snacks or something, I don't know. That could be helpful if we want to hang out a little bit afterwards. I wanted to make a full Chinese Kiddush lunch today, but it didn't happen.